questions about why they created this illusion. It was 7 Supreme Court judges basically laid this out. Okay, the system of government best adapted under existing circumstances to protect the diversified interests of the several provinces and to ensure efficiency, harmony, and permanency of the working of the Union is a general government charged with matters of common interest to the whole country, which is what? Our federal government. Okay? And local governments for each of the Canadas, Ontario and Quebec, and for the province of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, charged with the control of local matters in the respective sections. So again, when we look at that from this perspective, we see the rationale, the reasoning behind it. Before we had Canada, the federal government, what we had were just 4 separate provinces. And when you look at this as if you're in your neighborhood. There's you and you got 3 other neighbors. And each household has to do all the duties for everything. And you say, hey, why don't we all get together and create this other company and then hire this other company to do all the things that are common to all of us. Like we'll get him to take the garbage out for all of us and stuff like that. So we started looking at that. When they created this country, they said, look, it makes sense. We only need 1 post office. We only need 1 currency. We only need 1 military. So you're starting to see the logic behind it. So they created this company and they gave it a list of duties. But what they did is they retained what they wanted to keep. So who had the power in the first place? Provinces. Okay, well, one of the things they surrendered to the federal government was the right to collect indirect taxes. But they retained direct taxes. And this here becomes the basic argument of people who think it's unconstitutional because they think, well, the government's collecting direct taxes. And what they did in exchange for this, they knew that indirect tax was a very big field of taxes. About 80% of taxation can come through indirect taxes. They said, we'll surrender that to you, and what we want you to do is you collect it, and then every 10 years at that time, but it's 5 years now, we'll have a census, and then what you do, you send back a fixed sum plus so much per head. And that's why we have a census. We call these transfer payments now. So that was the structure of when they brought that, when they created this company called Canada. We go on in that Lord Nelson case because we're trying to figure out why did they create the illusion around here. It goes, the Constitution of Canada does not belong either to Parliament or to the legislature. It belongs to the country. And it is there the citizens of the country will find the protection to the rights to which they are entitled. Okay, so inside here it's the preamble where we know we're connected to Britain's Constitution. And they also go on to say, though, in there, it says, no power of delegation is expressed in either Section 91 or 92, nor indeed is there to be found the power of accepting delegation from one body to another. What they just said there is, once this thing was created, they put a wall between them. And they said, okay, all the things that you do, you have to do them, and all the things that we do, we have to do them. And we can't hire or enter in agreements back and forth. And now, all of a sudden, we have this provincial tax code. Think about when you file your income tax forms. How many do you file? 1 federal, 1 provincial. But where do you send them? Just to the federal. So if unless these Supreme Court judges are lying through their teeth, what's going on? Where did the federal government get the right to have us file and then do the tax collection agreement with them? It's either unconstitutional or whatever. So we're going to expand on that to look as this goes through here. And he goes, I have no doubt that if it had been the intentions to give such powers, it would have been expressed in clear and unequivocal languages. He goes, under the scheme of the British North America, there were to be, in the words of Lord Atkin of the Labour Convention, reference 1937, watertight compartments, which were an essential part of the original structure. So what you're seeing here is where a lot of the misunderstanding, the arguments come that it's unconstitutional because our federal government should not be collecting provincial taxes. Even if provinces were allowed to create an income tax, which they can't on us, but even if they were, they don't have the jurisdiction to collect them. Okay, so that's where a lot of this confusion is coming into. We go on to there, and we find it in there. The Parliament of Canada and the legislatures of the several provinces are sovereign within their sphere, as defined by the British North American Act. But none of them has the unlimited capacity of an individual. So who has more power in this country? You. So what you're seeing here is if you look at the true structure of this country, you have the people. It's a country that's founded on the supremacy of God with the people who created the provinces, who themselves said, let's create another subordinate thing and dump some stuff common to there. That's the way our country's true. But what do they want us to believe it is? What do we think it is? Who's in charge of our country? Federal government. We go to the poor old provinces begging for transfer payments and hang out. Oh yeah, and we're the people here somewhere, all right, going, what do you want me to do? It's the illusion they had to create because they know how this country was really structured and who we really are. But it's only an illusion. Okay, we have a great country. The foundation is set. I looked at this very much like building. We have a great country. There's, so part of our motivation on educating people was, there are some people trying to destroy this country. Is why destroy what is great? We just got to go in there and do a little bit of renovating. We already got one of the best foundations out there. So when we ask this, why the need for the illusion? The answer is simple. Because they know who you really are, and they know the law of creation. The created cannot be greater than its creator. And who created them? We the people. And by keeping us naive and ignorant of who we are and the rights that we have, this becomes the result. They get this illusion of power. So how do we see this illusion? Everything that this system does, it will be written down. It's all within there. So how can we go inside and see it going on? To do that, we need to get inside that illusion and look at it for what it is. How many people here have ever read a statute law? Okay. How about the income tax? Right? How did we read those? Did we sit down and dissect them word for word, or we just read them? Okay? Now, when we look at these things, they're called principles of interpretation. Like I say, was, for me, probably one of the best books I got to read was The Construction of Statutes, because I understood the principles of construction. And I found a section that talks about words. Okay, Lord Green said, the first thing one has to do, I venture to think, in construing words in a section of an Act of Parliament, is not to take those words in a vacuum, so to speak, and to attribute to them what is sometimes called their natural and ordinary meaning. Few words in the English language have a natural and ordinary meaning in the sense that they must be so read that their meaning is entirely independent of their context. You can't take a word and just leave it and everybody knows what it means. Very few words are like that. The method of construing statutes that I prefer is not to take particular words and attribute to them some sort of prima facie meaning, which you may have to displace or modify. It is so to read the statute as a whole and ask oneself the question, in this statute, in this context, relating to this subject matter, what is the true meaning of the word? Imagine trying to read a book that slow, analyze every word. Okay, but that's what's needed to be done when you're dealing in this legal world. Goes on to talk a little bit about definitions. Lord Simon says, he goes, nowadays we should add to the natural and ordinary meaning of the words in their context and according to their appropriate linguistic register, which is like legal dictionaries, definition sections, basically a hierarchy of definition where you can find the authoritative. On in there they talk about there are different reasons for having definitions. In some cases it's intended to subtract from or add to the normal meaning of a word. In some cases, it's intended that a word or expression should have a secondary rather than its primary meaning. It means something totally different from what we ever thought it would mean. So let's look at all that and put it into example. What is the meaning of the word fair? Now, across here, again, we probably all had a bunch of different ideas. When we first looked, that's what they're saying. You can't just take a word and everybody understands it, because we need context around it. So let's add some context. He went to the fair for fun. Now we're all pretty well on the same page, right? Well, what if we missed a step? Let's check the definition section first. Fair means moon. How many guessed that? When you look at it, they say, well, you can't do that. That's stupid. That's illogical. That's immoral. That's all this. What you're seeing here is the difference between the real world and the legal world. A lot of things that are illegal can be made, are unlawful, can be made legal when you go inside. Okay? This is nothing new. This here is about the simplicity of seeing through this illusion if we'd slow down and try to read these statutes for what they're really saying. We've tracked this back to 16th century there. Betham's theory of legal fiction. They called it word magic. It's taking a word and using through definitions, making it mean something totally different. So when I said, hey, I'm going to the fair tomorrow, right? I said, I'll give you $100 if you go to the fair. Who's going to win? Because when I tell you what the definition of fair was, you just lost. I can't get to the moon. This is what we're going to look at, is to actually, if you can accept this principle of how they've played the game, you will see it and you'll start understanding this is a really scary game. Now, when I was starting this whole research, I got very confused. I remember sitting at my desk, I had dictionaries open, statute law open, I'm trying to figure out what does a word mean? Because it meant something different here, something different there, something different there. But over time, by persisting on that, I started seeing some structure, some arithmetic format to that. So a procedure sort of developed for the source of authority for the definition of word needs to be followed if a reasonable interpretation of the intent department is to be established. So if you're looking at a word and you check the act that you're reading, you check if it's in a subsection, you check to see if that one word had been redefined in the subsection you're looking at. If it hadn't, then you can feel safe. Then you got to go to the definition section of the act. Okay, because that one word could have been redefined for the whole act. If it wasn't, then you need to go to the interpretation act. Okay, what the Interpretation Act, every province has one and the federal government has one. They lay out some of the principles of interpretation, rules of construction, plus they also have a list of common expressions defined. They'll put a lot of words in an Interpretation Act which carry a default meaning over all their statutes.